This year's AFCON so far has continued that tale. We've seen a lot of smaller teams surprising a lot of big teams.
Think about it. In the middle of Christmas, you have a tournament like AFCON.
I hope that those who are looking at world football will begin to respect African football.
For a very long time, people have treated AFCON like it's a regional thing. This is a world thing. And so when you see, for example, what's happened in Morocco, where you have the biggest of African names,
It's almost like the great equalizer. You see the big names in African football playing with some players that are not as well known on the continent.
That is why I am so in disagreement with what CAF has done to make the tournament every 4 years.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of VIP Bylines AFCON Debrief. AFCON has kicked off in Morocco a week ago with passion, and we are here to unpack it all. Joining me are two brilliant voices in African football coverage, journalist Mike Hove and journalist David Vandy, to help us make sense of the action on and off the pitch. Let's get started. David and Mike, welcome to the show.
thank you, Linord.
Thank you so much, Linord. This is like a reunion. I love it.
It is a reunion indeed from our old media house, and
I
here we
know.
are on the VIP show. So I know you guys are fired up with this Africa Cup of Nations going on now. As we speak, we just finished one of the big games of this first phase of the competition. But before we dive into it, let me have your first impression. I mean, the event is happening in Morocco. It's been a week now, a little over a week, and there've been a lot going on. A lot of scores have happened, a lot of drama as well. What is your first big impression of AFCON this year so far? Let me start with you, Mike.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. When we speak about AFCON, this is really one tournament that I find really it's exciting. When we talk about world football, AFCON for me has been one tournament that's always stood out, regardless of any competition that you put on the spotlight for different reasons, right? This is where you mix what I like to refer to as the world talent and the world's biggest raw talent, right? So you've got the biggest names on world football, the Mo Salahs, Omar Mamouche, etc. But you also get to see a lot of raw talent that comes out of the continent, all clashing on the same stage. And so this is the one competition where you get to see a lot of Cinderella stories, a lot of beautiful stories, a lot of emerging African talent being placed on the world spotlight. So this year's AFCON so far has continued that tale. We've seen a lot of smaller teams surprising a lot of big teams. Just today actually, we saw Mozambique upset Gabon 3-2, something we've never seen. Mozambique winning their very first AFCON game. We got to see the clash of the giants between Ivory Coast, and we got to see a lot of issues that usually happen with AFCON, and it's something that's really exciting. So I'd like to say the tradition has continued. The only thing I can point out that really has upset me so far is the attendance. But that's something that happens every year for different complications, for different reasons. But other than that, from a playing standpoint and from a team standpoint, it's definitely something to be applauded.
You make such a good point. You know, it's almost like the great equalizer. You see the big names in African football playing with some players that are not as well known on the continent. So, yes, AFCON is that kind of football moment for the continent. So, to you, David, what is your impression of the first week of AFCON in Morocco?
Well, thank you very much, Leonard, for having me. And it has been great for me because, like Mike said, this is one of the biggest showcase of African football in world football. You know, and for me, this particular AFCON, the opening ceremony was just fantastic. Getting some of the big names in African music to headline the opening ceremony was classic, and also, you know, uh, um, it's not just the opening ceremony with the lights and all this stuff. It was like you're watching the World Cup. That means Africa has gone to another level When you look at the quality of the stadium, of that opening ceremony, the ambience that was there, you see that, we are that was in a completely different level, and also we did not just look at that. You look at the fashion that was displayed by our African footballers. They did not just come there with their apparels that they used to go on the field, but when they appeared, you know that these boys are really appearing for good. So that fashion, the style from the different countries, that was one thing that also attracted me to the opening, and for the kind of matches and the teams that are involved. Mike has already elaborated on that, but we'll get deep into that. But those are the opening ceremony was one thing that actually captured my attention with the people like the Davidos, Angelique Kidjo
Yes.
making headlines. You see that as
Yes.
Africans, we're beginning to make use of our own.
You're making a good point because the opening ceremony is such a key moment, even though everybody is waiting for the games. But the opening ceremony kind of set the stage. And it also is a moment for the country to show the craftsmanships in terms of production, in terms of, coordination and expertise on different levels. And you
Mhm.
see the African talents coming together. Angelique Kidjo, as you mentioned, Davido, and many others. And it was such a great, great moment of celebration, right, Mike? I mean, this moment is
Absolutely.
also as important as the games.
Absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely. I mean, moments like these, like you mentioned, set the stage for everything else, right? So when you roll out the red carpet and you show that you mean business, I mean, like you mentioned, these are all headline names. And once again, like I said, these are not just. One issue that I've really had with tournaments like AFCON, which has been shown by reputable football names, is that for a very long time, people have treated AFCON like it's a regional thing. This is a world thing. And so when you see, for example, what's
Exactly.
happened in Morocco, where you have the biggest of African names, these are names that are not just big on the tournament on the continent anymore. These are names that are big in the world. I love that
Mhm.
because it's showing that AFCON is becoming a world stage.
And you see what you're saying there, Mike. Um, Watching the AFCON again, something that caught my attention when you talked about it is a world thing. Look at some of the big names
Hmm.
in world football
Hmm.
that are linked to Africa, but they're not playing for Africa,
Hmm.
but they are in the world. They
Yes.
are sitting up in the stands. The Kylian Mbappe,
Yes. Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Lamine Yamal, the other superstar from Real Madrid. Most of them are there to support their country,
Hmm.
even though they are not playing for that country, but they are there to support them. They are there to support their friends. So this, in years past, we don't see those kind of things. You
Yes.
know, we don't
Yes.
see that. But now they are going there. They want to show that they are affiliated with AFCON.
Hmm.
They want to
Hmm.
show that they are affiliated with the countries that are playing. They're affiliated with Africa.
And you also mentioned earlier, David, the fashion. We're gonna get into that because when you talk fashion, you get my attention, right? We're, we're gonna get to that. Let's delve into the game now. Week one going on, week two. What was some of the key moments for you, Mike?
Before we even talk about AFCON, right, I want to point out something. If you look at, I'm a big viewer of the English Premier League. Manchester United is my team. And one thing I do want to point out is AFCON is one tournament that has left a lot of English teams in their wits crying, wondering what to do next
Hmm.
because all their talent is at AFCON,
The talent.
right? That already
Yes,
speaking to
yes.
the testament of African football and how it's evolving and how it's becoming the center of world football. And then if you're now watching the actual tournament itself, you're starting to see the biggest names in the world playing center stage, creating headlines, creating storylines. Just watching week one and week two has had me at wit's end. If I mention some of the games that for me, am emotionally involved with when I watch Egypt versus South Africa, the story of trying to see what
Mm,
happens with Mo Salah. When you watch
yes.
Nigeria, what's happening with
Hmm.
Victor Osimhen and Ademola Lookman. When you watch, like I mentioned earlier on, Gabon and Mozambique, being surprised. Gabon is home to one of the biggest football forwards of all time. If you talk about African football, Emerick Aubameyang. And so to see them lose to Mozambique for the first time ever is another shocking story. So for me, this AFCON, and it goes back to what I said earlier on, is continuing the tradition that AFCON always has. AFCON is one tournament that I watch and never rule out any team because I've seen the shocks. I've seen the surprises. I've seen the Cinderella stories when it comes to AFCON. If we talk about, for example, last AFCON, seeing what happened with Ivory Coast, that's one of many stories where you rule out one team, you think it's over, and boy, oh boy, do they flip the script and go win the tournament. We saw the story of what happened with Comoros in the previous, AFCON, where this is one small team that everybody ruled out. All of a sudden, this is a team that everybody is celebrating. We're seeing these stories happen time and time again, and I won't be surprised if this happens again in this AFCON. This is going to be a continuation.
David, let me have your take on this as well, in
Yes.
terms of the quality and some of the moments that were so critical so far for you.
Yeah, you see, Mike just hit that right on the head there, talking about the quality. The quality is there because, like he said, like he rightly said, some of the Premier League teams, some of the big teams that are playing world football, they are struggling right now. Take, for example, like my team, Liverpool, you understand, one of the greatest players of today, of this generation, is playing in the AFCON, Mo Salah. You understand? And we are missing him. And even the Premier League is missing Mo Salah. There is not a day when analysts will be talking and they don't talk about the absence of Mo Salah in the Premier League. With all of this, and you see the encouragement when you see top players like these playing with young players from the continent that has not played European football, you see that this is an inspiration for them. For them to be playing with the people of Mo Salah,
Yes.
Hakim in Morocco, this is an inspiration for them. So I want to believe this AFCON, we have not gone too far yet, but from what I have seen, it looks like it is getting to a point where it is becoming one of the best because with the kind of football that we are seeing right now, we have seen some of the upsets. We have seen some like the match Mike mentioned between South Africa and Egypt. That match was classic.
Yes.
It was class.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
And this last game that Morocco played,
Morocco and Mali, that's correct.
Yes.
we're not
Definitely.
expecting Morocco to run away with that. There is a lot of quality in this particular AFCON. I hope that those who are
Yes.
looking at
Yes.
world football will begin to respect African football.
This is also a classic example of the fact that this is so unpredictable. You do not know, and everyone has a chance when it comes to AFCON at this point. I feel like once a team has qualified, yes, you have the strong teams, you have the favorites and everything, but you should not take anybody lightly. And
No,
this game
no, no,
was
no,
one
you know.
example. Look at Sudan. I mean, who would have thought,
I
right?
was just going to talk about Sudan. Look at Sudan beating Equatorial Guinea.
Absolutely.
Sudan has been at war. You understand? But when you look, you will see that Sudan has a lot of young talent and that have quality. And you look at Sudan in the next few years, the kind of
Yes.
team that they're going to become.
I think that so many of the talents of the players just need the right infrastructure, the right. That's why football is such an expensive game. When
Absolutely.
I say expensive, I mean in terms of investment, sponsorship, and everything. Because once a player has the right infrastructure, the player can bloom. And teams like Sudan's are always there to tell us that kind of stories. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely telling the truth. The thing that differentiates African football from, for example, European football is exactly just that. It's about investment and infrastructure. It's not about talent. I'll tell you that for free. The reason being, if you see some of the biggest names, like as I mentioned in world football right now, they're playing in AFCON. That alone says a lot. And that aside, if you look at the conversation of how many players are starting to switch allegiance towards their African countries, that's another conversation to be had, right? Right now, playing at AFCON is Aaron Winbasaka, who used to play for England, switched allegiance. He's now playing for DRC, right? We're starting to see a couple of Ghanaian players right now who played for England, where there's a conversation of whether or not they can switch allegiance to play for Ghana in the next World Cup. All these are chats that are speaking to the talent that is on the continent and seeing how the conversation around African football is changing. The only difference is how much investment is there. And what I do want to applaud is CAF. CAF is starting to change the conversation around African football. CAF is slowly starting to inject more money into African federations, but it's something that once again CAF can't do alone. It needs to work with the governments in the continent. It needs to work with private players in the private sector who are looking to inject more money. But this is something that's evolving. This is something that's starting to happen a lot more. So far as we speak, Africa's only hosted one FIFA World Cup, which was in South Africa in 2010. We're going to have our next one, which is going to be coming to Morocco, as they're hosting it across Morocco, Spain, and I believe one other country. But we need to start seeing more of that on the continent, because that's starting to not only reflect the talent on the continent, but also starting to change that mindset of what does it mean to be a football star from Africa. Because when you start having more big names, naturally you want to attach yourself to that. Naturally you want to start pouring more money. You want to start investing more money to make sure that there's more emerging talents. As we're starting to see African teams also starting to play on the world stage. Recently at the FIFA Club World Cup, we had a lot of African teams that were playing at that. We need more things like that allow African teams not only to showcase their talent, but to attract a lot more investment.
From what Mike has just said, that is why I am so in disagreement with what CAF has done to make the tournament every 4 years. I am so in disagreement with that. Because, like what you're saying now, we need more investment into the African football. We need more power. We need more games. We need more attention. But taking it to 4 years is going to reduce that attention. Now we see, like you rightly mentioned, we see how talents that were born in Europe are beginning to link themselves to Africa. They want to come and play for Africa. Those who are third generation Africans wants to come. You understand? But now, when you create that gap, they lose interest. At least the 2 years was very good. That after 2 years, we see them coming. And there's going to be a lot of development, because when all these big names come to Africa to play, you have the giants of world football to also come to Africa. And Mike mentioned the World Cup has taken place just once in Africa. And the next one is going to be a combination of Africa, Spain, and some other place. Not just Africa. So I am so in disagreement. I don't know why CAF decided to announce that now or make that decision or how they came about it, but I don't like it one bit.
It's this whole issue about for every 4 years. It's not a new idea. It was thrown out there before. It was something that was lingering in the past. Now, why is it now that it became like a decision, if you will? It's really the big question. And some people agree with it because they say it will give time to the teams to prepare, to the countries to prepare, because some countries may not have all the infrastructures, and it will give time to for players to rest. At the same time, like you said, Dave, this is a moment for African football to be really to take center stage globally, because it doesn't just impact Africa, but the world is also watching. We saw at the last AFCON how the viewership in AFCON in Ivory Coast really beat another tournament that was taking place in Europe. So it's a matter of big money, big viewership. And Mike, what is your take on this?
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Honestly, it's really the problem that's happening right now, if to call it a problem, is that, as you mentioned, Linord, it's now a money game, right? It's now about how do we attract the biggest eyeballs at the same attention. But only one thing I can point out that I'm really struggling to grasp with is when you shift it to every 4 years, you're now clashing with tournaments like the Euro and Copa America. They're already fighting for eyeballs. So now you have AFCON, Euros, Copa America at the same time. Europe is home to the biggest of football names already. Naturally, people are going to gravitate towards that. You have Copa America, which is home to some of the biggest, once again, football names in terms of South American talent. And then comes Africa. Now, Africa, once again, we are home to arguably the most big names in world football. However, in terms of infrastructure, viewership, finances, and when I talk finances, I mean human capital. I mean boots on ground, people in stadiums. It's not the same, right? Right now we're watching AFCON in Morocco, and in some of the games, the stadiums, the players might as well be training because the stadiums are so empty. That would never happen in a Euro tournament because they would always find ways to make sure that the finances are right and that the fans can attend that. So things like that make it very difficult. So now what's happening is instead of having, for example, a Rio Ferdinand who's in England, who's paying attention to what is happening in Africa, he's now having to pay attention to what his own team is doing in England. That kind of takes away the attention. So that part I really struggle to understand what exactly the long game is. From a short term perspective, I can see things like having to because right now what happens is because AFCON is a tournament that happens separately to what the rest of the world is doing. A lot of confederations have to fight with their players and their teams to get access to their players, right? So, for example, Manchester United had to negotiate with Cameroon and all these different teams to make sure that their players can either stick around a little longer, and they keep AFCON is the only tournament where they keep having that back and forth. Euro never happens because obviously when Euro happens, the whole Europe is shut down. Copa America
Yeah.
happens at the same time as Euro, so they never have to have that back and forth. So the only logical thing that I can see is that means CAF is giving in to that back and forth instead of standing their ground and saying, no, these are our players. We should be doing things at our
Yes.
time. So I fail to understand that
Point.
part.
Like Mike said, this is power play.
Hmm.
It is power play. Money talks.
Hmm.
Yes.
AFCON is the only competition that has been moved around like you kicking the ball.
Hmm.
When they feel they send it this time. When they feel
Absolutely.
they send it that time. When they feel they send it that time. So you
Hmm.
find out that you are even confusing the people that wants to go watch AFCON.
There are
Because if you
people who
do it in
didn't know there was
January,
supposed to be an AFCON this year.
yeah, and next year you say, oh, the next 2 years you say, oh, no, we're going to do it in June.
Hmm.
Then by the time the
Yes.
other 2 years come, you say, oh no, we're going to do it in May. So people are confused. Why is this other competition have their stagnant time? So people are preparing for that. You understand? When the Euros
Hmm.
come, people are preparing for that because they know that particular time is time for the Euros. So that
Yes.
calendar is already set. So why can't CAF try to make sure that the AFCON date is set within a particular time frame so that when that time is coming, people will be preparing themselves to go to that competition. But if you start, as soon as when they start throwing it all around, you get people confused how to set up their budget, how to set up their plans, how to see where they can go. And the other things, like Mike said, now that the Premier League is going on, that is when AFCON is playing. And you cannot get Rio Ferdinand, who is an analyst, Jimmy Carragher, Lineker, and all of them to be paying attention to AFCON because their teams are playing and they are paying them for that.
Honestly, when I hear you guys and from what we observe, right, it really seems like CAF or maybe the African tournament accommodates more as opposed to other tournaments. You know what I mean? Think about it. In the middle of Christmas, you have a tournament like AFCON. How
Exactly.
I don't even know what to say about this. That really bothered me a little bit because I'm thinking, so the players, the supporters, the teams, and everything, they don't celebrate Christmas. I mean, yes, AFCON
Well,
is important, but was it a big deal to move it just 1 week, or what is so critical that CAF had to adapt to
well,
accommodate this tournament during the such a holiday? Please
well
enlighten me, because yeah.
I will not look. I don't take it personal when it comes to the Christmas holiday because even in England, um, and the other big leagues, the tournament, their tournament is still going on.
Okay.
Matches are still being played. The only day they will not play is Christmas Day.
Yeah,
But like
AFCON
the
didn't.
next day, while they
Hmm.
celebrate Boxing Day, like in England, they have a whole day full of matches. You understand? In Germany, they have a whole day full of matches. So I wouldn't look at it that they are not celebrating Christmas. And if we want to look at it that way, sometimes uh, football competitions fall even during the month of Ramadan. And those who are Muslims they are being paid to go and play football. So they play,
Okay.
and then at the end of the day they go break their fast. So you see, I don't want to look at it that way. I just want to I think um more or less it's the power play, it's the money thing that Africa is always depending on other people from the outside to tell us what to do. And
That's
CAF
a big
has,
okay.
that's the main thing. CAF has
Okay.
always been the listening one, and implementing what these other people are saying. Because if we take our stand, we
Okay.
will not be moving, the competition from one month to the other, from this to that, from that to that. We will have our own say.
David make a good point explaining that even there are other tournaments that are also taking place around the holiday season that it's more a power play as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. This shouldn't be happening. AFCON shouldn't be the one tournament that's moved around like it's on a chessboard. AFCON should be a tournament, should be a tournament that should be respected. There's no logical reason as to why the Confederation of African Football is the one federation that has to cave in to the demands of these global hegemonic football federations. Like we're talking about, for example, the English Premier League, etc. That shouldn't be a thing. For me personally, I once again, it's something that I'm really struggling to understand, the whole ideology behind AFCON shifting dates all of a sudden from 2 years to 4 years. I fail to see what the long term vision plan is. If there's a money play or something, maybe the CAF needs to come out a lot more clearer with that. But yeah, for me, I personally am against that. As I mentioned early on, I think this is just something that, when I look at what I see right now, just takes away the attention from what AFCON currently has.
Mhm.
Um, I honestly, maybe someone in the comments can explain further as to why they would think it's a positive thing to go 4 years, but I'm not, I stand with David on this one. I'm against that.
As the saying goes, follow the money, right?
Amen.
Speaking about the game itself, which team really surprised you so far?
I'm gonna go with Mozambique. Them taking on Gabon, and once again, there's been a lot more exciting games. But in terms of historic games, I'm definitely gonna that game for me is one that has stood out the most. That's, it was something that I didn't see happening to begin with. If anyone watched the game, you would have seen how shocking it was, right? To see by halftime Mozambique was up 3-1. Yeah, I was like, well. By the time Gabon scored their second goal, I was like, okay, well, this is game on. I guess Gabon is finally getting back into the game. But no, no, and no. At some point, Mozambique could have scored again, and it was 4-2, except the final goal was ruled as an offside. So to see the Mambas play like that and take on a big team like Gabon, it's something to be applauded. As I mentioned, AFCON, typically the story is that you have a lot of Cinderella stories that come out of that. What I will also applaud is every small team, small, and I put that in air quotes, that has played at AFCON, because we've seen a lot of big teams struggle just to get the 1 point. As you mentioned, Morocco and Mali, right? Typically, you would expect Morocco to take on Mali a lot easier. And Mali, bear in mind, is a big team on the continent, but Morocco is a big team when we're talking about world football, right? And then we also saw Nigeria and Tanzania not so long ago. Nigeria just barely scraping past the Taifa Stars. We saw Zimbabwe and Egypt. We saw the Pharaohs just scraping past the Warriors.
Hmm.
We're seeing these stories time and time again where a lot of these quote unquote smaller teams are taking it to the bigger teams. This
And
year,
I,
we're seeing a lot of giants
yeah,
barely make it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when we get to the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. Because, man, these games are really exciting.
And for me, my biggest take there of the Cinderella story, I'll go back to Sudan. My reason for going back to Sudan is the fact that Sudan has not been stable. I have been in a war-torn situation. I have lived in a war country. You understand? And there was a time when our players will be gathered from across the world to a different country. That is where they will settle. They will not come into Sierra Leone. That is where they will come in some other country before they go play. So I begin to imagine what the Sudanese players have been going through to get to where they are. To even qualify, you understand? To even qualify. And with, for them to win their first game, it's historic, you know. So I really, really applaud Sudan for what they've done. And there's another team, but I don't know if it is like it is Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is a team that has been playing in different nation cups, but the way they are playing right now, and watch when Burkina Faso is playing, the stadium is almost full. Anywhere they were playing today, the stadium is almost. I don't know if people are gathering towards Burkina Faso. People are falling in love with Burkina Faso. You understand? But they are really moving, and they are taking a lot of attention. People are looking at Burkina Faso from a different light right now.
Mozambique, Sudan, and Burkina Faso are really those teams that are considered to be underdogs. But they are really showing that they're not just there to make up the numbers, right? They are quietly making this group stage very uncomfortable for some big names. And
Mhm.
these are definitely teams to watch. And I think that we will have a lot of surprises in this AFCON. Who impressed you in terms of individual players? One or two names? David.
I know he's going to say I'm going to say Mo Salah. No. Yeah. But I think one player, the team as a whole, I have not been too impressed. That is the Super Eagles of Nigeria. But Ademola Lookman has been a standout player for me in the Nigerian team.
Yeah.
You know, Ademola Lookman is not the Oshamen. He is the
Yeah.
quiet guy in the corner, but he's always doing his own thing. He's not looking for the attention. But when
Yeah.
you look at him in the team, you
Yeah.
know that there is somebody in that team that can take the Super Eagles to some place. Even when they are not playing well, but when Ademola Lookman is in that team, you expect something to happen. The Gabonese goalkeeper,
Goalkeepers.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh
They
my
are
yes,
often
God.
overlooked, but yes.
man,
He's the
Yeah.
the
one who did a
Gabonese goal.
double shot stop today.
Thank you.
Oh God.
Very impressive. Very
Very,
impressive.
very, you
Very
know.
impressive.
So these players, for the big names like the Mo Salahs, the Mamouche, and
Yes.
the Hakims, I look at them as players that they're already up there.
And you, Mike, one or two names?
So the first one that I'll put is Amad Diallo. And not just because he's a Manchester United player, but I really like the role that he's playing for Ivory Coast. He's not the talisman, but you can see his flair as a young player is coming out, and I love how he plays. And then the second player I'm going to point out, even though Dave just ruled him out, is Omar Mamouche. The reason being, once again, their talisman is typically Mo Salah. But if you watch any of their past two games, Omar Mamouche actually carried the Pharaohs. He's the player who's garnering all the attention and is allowing all these other players to shine. And for me, players like that are players that will always catch my attention. Players like that are players that I'll always appreciate because these are players who football has changed into like a system game. And so whenever I see an individual player that plays with shine, that plays unapologetically, it reminds me of the football that I watched growing up. It reminds me of watching players like JJ Okocha. It reminds me of watching players like Ronaldinho.
that allowed fans to be on the edge of their seat the whole game. I love players like that. And so for me, so far, those two I think stood out for me. Omar Marmoush and Amad Diallo definitely are players to shine.
And you see, if I can come in there, I am not a supporter of Manchester United. You know that. I don't like them today, and I don't like them one bit. But Ahmad, you see, when I saw Ahmad playing today against Cameroon, and I saw him in the other matches, like you said, the entire Cote d'Ivoire team is on Ahmad. On Ahmad, he is carrying the team. You find out that most of the ball that Cote d'Ivoire is playing, they play with Ahmad on that right flank. That is where their goal came from. And they rely on Ahmad's speed. So Ahmad, for me, he is a standout player. You know, I, I felt bad originally when he started at Manchester United, the way they were just pushing him around, you know, until they see that this boy is the one that is saving Manchester United from being relegated. Because for any time he is on the field, you see that he creates. There's a lot of creativity around him. So I see him too, but I did not look at him because I see that he's up there. He plays with Manchester United. He's one of the big names. That is why I did not even mention people like Mbeumo. Mbeumo is a good player, but you can see that even today you will see flashes of him. You understand? But nah, there were other people that are not known that were actually coming up.
You guys mentioned Ahmad, so I will leave this to you guys because he was also one of my picks. Definitely, he's a force to be reckoned with on the field. And in terms of goalkeepers, Rowan Williams, very sturdy. He's a leader. He's a
South Africa
leader in the
goalkeeper.
back.
Mm, mm.
Yes, yes. And I think Riyad Mahrez from Algeria is also, in terms of attackers, is definitely someone who's doing a good job on the field. Good guys. So that was a great conversation. Listen, we're gonna wrap soon, but before we do that, let me ask you, who was your favorite dresser or your favorite fashion at the arrival? Starting with
Hmm.
you, Mike
Favorite.
Hovey.
Honestly speaking, it's hard to say who's the. I like them all. Honestly speaking, the reason I say that is, first of all, this is the first AFCON where I've seen them actually do that. If I stand corrected, but this is the first AFCON where they've actually come and showcased traditional colors in their traditional settings. So that and it tracks back to what David said, right? This was an opening ceremony that really we've never seen before in terms of how lavish they went. Um, so yeah, I honestly don't think I can point out one. I appreciated every single one of them for different reasons. Every single one of them got to showcase their different cultural settings and where they're from, which to me was beautiful. It showcased how amazing Africa is, and not just in dress style, but in personality. Every single one of them had that personality, that vibrancy. So yeah, it's hard to point out one just for me, honestly.
Okay. Dave, who was your favorite?
The one that actually stood out for me is, which country is that? With the gold jacket, the gold and white.
Cote
Mike, you remember
d'Ivoire,
that? Cote
Yep.
d'Ivoire.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ivory Coast, yes.
That because that was my standout. You know, I love what Senegal wore. When you look at Senegal in that white, it's like that was a wedding day for them. But I
Yeah.
tell you, yeah, it was a wedding day for them. But Cote d'Ivoire, actually, I doff my hat out to them. That was one of the best for me.
Okay, and I will second that. I think Cote d'Ivoire was my best dressed team. They mixed traditional with modern design, traditional pattern and fabric. So it was really a unique, very very unique. Other teams dressed very well in their traditional outfits and everything, but I think the mixture of modern and traditional was well executed by Cote d'Ivoire. And we will leave it at that. Mike Hovey, David, Vandy, thank you so much. It was such a delight to talk to you.
We need this
Thank
again.
you so much. It's so
Yes.
good. This is so good. I love it. Thank you. Now,
Listen, AFCON is ongoing until January and we'll be back.
all
Definitely.
right.
This is not the
Thank
last
you.
one. And I can't
Thank
wait to
you.
have you back here so we can have more conversation around AFCON 2025, guys.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
Linord.
And thanks to you, our viewers. Thank you so much for joining in today. For more on VIP Bylines, AFCON specials, and all other shows on the VIP News Network, like our channel, subscribe, and we will keep you up to date with new shows. Thank you all, and see you next time.